I have so many ideas in my head. I'll try this, I'll try that. I have this idea about excellent education. I'll do this, that. Then the reality actually hits, and you understand the context of your classroom, and then you see that, oh no, this needs to be fixed before you think that X idea need to be implemented here.
So today we are joined by our guest, Ms. Palak Chandak. She is an educator, a Teach for India fellow who teaches math, science in lower income schools and is affiliated with the Bombay Municipal Corporation. She is also a graduate from NMIMS School of Commerce and a passionate advocate of equitable education and sustainable teaching practices. And the intention of this podcast is that we want to spread awareness around education and the problems faced by its stakeholders, such as students, parents, and teachers. And we're so glad to have you on board because you work at the very grassroots level. And we hope that eventually this podcast can function as a learning resource for these same stakeholders. So, without further ado, I'll just move into the first question. So, what made you want to invest 2 years of your life into education with the Teach for India Fellowship?
Um, First of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be sharing my experience. Um, so I would tell you that this is not just 2 years of my life, but it's just a gateway for me to get into the education. And I'll tell you where I come from. Since childhood, I've been a a first bencher and high performing child. As a high performing child, I always had a lot of pressure in terms of my academics. I need to be rank one all the time, and I had to do a lot of studies for which I couldn't do a lot of things that I wanted to actually do, like dancing, gardening, all other extra activities, not curricular related. So, there I realized, like, if I had not to focus a lot on my academics, these are the things that I would have also explored, and that of course need to be a part of my education. Why it need to be separate? And that's where I came from when I realized, okay, then I would not want the generations to be coming, experiencing the same drill that I had to go through, because um, for sure the coming generations are going to be more creative, more curious, exploring new avenues and ideas. Hence, I took this opportunity up. I always wanted to do it since school, since the time that I got to know about Teach for India and the fellowship. Um, because honestly, I believe that this is actually a gateway to understand Indian education system at a very grassroots level. At the same time, practicing things that are not being practiced in a very conventional uh, manner. So yeah, that is pretty much why I'm here and why I wanted to be here.
All right. Yeah, that sounds great. It sounds like a very, like, I feel like you went through sort of this reflective journey of what really mattered. And really, it was, it's great to hear that you spent your time doing this. Uh, and so many kids get educated in the type of schools you work with, which are the public schools. However, when we talk about education, often we talk about learning spaces in like a more private setup and glaze over the governmental institutions. So, what insights can you give us into some of the problems that you have observed while working in a government school setup?
All right. When it comes to problem in a government school setup, I can go on and on. Um, but largely, these are the three umbrella problems that I have been able to observe and figure out myself. Um, First being, the government, I would say the authorities are not able to prioritize on their goals and try to do and solve problems like 10 problems at a time, which is why it is very difficult for them to solve one problem efficiently and deliver. Um, Second thing that I feel like, and you might have heard this a lot, that the government teachers and the government staff is not very motivated. um, they lack the ability to go out there an extra mile and like do something for their kids. I'll tell you where it comes from. They are overworked. When I tell you overworked, it's not from the point of view where teachers are supposed to be teaching, but from the 10 other things that the teachers are supposed to be doing, being a government teacher. And these are the two umbrella problems and challenge, I would say, that I have seen in the government setup. Apart from that, um, their priorities is not children driven, learning outcomes driven. However, I have a very limited perception towards it for the kind of exposure I have had with, say, 1 or 5 BMC schools, and also in context of Mumbai. But uh, that is where I am speaking from. So yeah, largely these two problems are the ones that I have seen. The teachers are overworked, the priorities are not really set, and the outcomes are not student driven as much. Yeah.
So, what do you think some potential solutions to these problems can be? And maybe could they be implemented at a much wider level?
Um, okay, so I just said like I might have a very restricted view and limited view of what I can think of, but there's this one solution that I was just thinking the other day, that probably the government can implement a larger program wherein the government schools are given um, an admin department. uh, I'll tell you why. Because the teachers are supposed to be doing the admin work apart from the entire teaching process, which is in itself is a very hefty process. Right? It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of innovation. It takes a lot of ideas and creativity. Uh, but because their work gets so monotonous at a point doing all the admin work, they're not able to drive the outcomes. So one very simple solution can be every government school having an admin department. um, I see in a lot of private colleges and a lot of private schools, they have their own admin department, so that the teacher actually can focus on student learning. And that can be a very simple solution here as well. Why not? There are ample amount of people who are looking forward for employment and a government service yet. So it can be a very simple yet a very efficient uh, solution to this particular problem. Another thing, when I say that the uh, outcomes are not student driven, it also comes from the teacher being under resourced. Like the entire online learning that has shifted, it has affected the children that I teach the most. There are children that are a part of my school that couldn't access learning for an entire year and probably for another year, whatever the conditions are these days. The reason being, the teachers are not equipped well to using Zoom. They don't have enough technological support. Forget children having technological support. The teachers also don't have technological support. Uh, they didn't know how to make presentations. They don't know how to use online platforms to leverage learning. So there can be spaces wherein teachers are trained in a manner wherein they can use their existing resources to the optimal level and help kids learning better. So yeah, these are the two solutions that I could think of the other day.
Yeah, I'm sure like COVID-19 has disproportionately affected lower income communities, and we've been hearing a lot about it, and it must have definitely, like, we come from a very privileged position when it comes to education, internet access, simple things that we don't even uh, think about on a day-to-day basis. There was also another thing that I think you keep coming back to, which is student outcomes, or how do we make the most out of the time the student is spending in the school. So, are there any strategies that you use in particular to help student outcomes, and why do you think they work?
All right, so I would give credits to my particular role as a fellow. wherein I've learned a lot of pedagogical practices that I bring back to my classroom and like just experiment there. Few things that have worked with me is having my own pedagogical practice. Um, Second thing that worked for me was strong goal setting with children. When I say goal setting, it is not just about me setting up a goal for the classroom for the kids. It's also about me setting up a space wherein they can set their own goals and leverage my support. When I talk about goals as well, like largely as a student, you might think like goals are all about marks and this, that. No, it is also about values. It's also about the code of conduct as a student. It's also about um, how you're going to be behaving with the other person around, right? So these are also the goals that kids set. And it's not end of the year, it's long period of time. It's in chunks of period of time wherein sometimes it's weekly, sometimes it's for 2 months, for 3 months, and that's how we do goal setting. Another practice that we have in our classroom and Teach for India largely practices is called differentiation. It's a theory wherein we cater to every child's need, because we all know that kids' learning pace is not same in a classroom. Differentiation is something that we bring to the classroom to be able to cater to each and every child and help them, like, learn at their own pace. Uh, for which a teacher need to be very aware of every child in the classroom, what their needs are, how to facilitate in the manner where the kids learn. Um, then then comes to reflection. So when I say have your own pedagogical practice, I have a pedagogical practice which says uh, absorb, experiment, um, then adapt and reflect, right? So
Adapt
it's
and
very reflect. So when I see something in my classroom, I take a step ahead, I reflect, sorry, I experiment, and then after the experiment I try to see that okay, what are the things working, not working. Then I try to adapt, and then reflect on my entire practice, like is it really something that my class needs. So, and that need not to be on a very yearly or say, like, quarterly basis. It can even be a daily basis practice. Every time you step into your classroom, you should know what you're doing. um, Another thing that I practice for driving student outcome is having a classroom culture and a vision. Like, for an entire year, what do I envision my kids to be, what do I envision my class to be like how entrepreneurs set their culture of their organization, how every organization might feel different. Similarly, in a classroom there needs to be a classroom culture wherein every child in the classroom is supposed to conduct themselves in a certain manner. Otherwise, everybody will just behave their own way because of the background that they come from. They come from different families, they come from different places, uh, and the diversity is just crazy. So to bring them together in a place, there needs to have a uniform culture. So these are certain practices that I've learned from Teach for India, and I take back to the classroom to drive student outcomes. Yeah.
I'm sure that the learning curve during the fellowship, in order to, pick up on all of these different ways to create student outcomes, the curve must be really steep. So, what do you think are some of the mistakes that you made as a new teacher, or that you've seen new teachers make in general? What are some assumptions that you came into the teaching space with, and how have they changed over time? And lastly, is there any advice you would like to give new teachers in general?
Yeah. So one thing that I came in to my classroom was having assumption about this classroom being my classroom and all about my kids and me. It was all wrong. It is not like that. The classroom is not just about the teacher and the students. It's about 100 other stakeholders that you're managing at the same time. um, who is associated that one with that one particular child. Um, so a child interacts with a lot of people in their day. Also, the kids that come to my classroom comes from a community wherein they're barely in their house all the time. They're interacting with so many people at the same time in their community, always roaming around here and there. Um, so I need to keep that in mind to understand where my kids are coming from and why is one particular child behaving the way they are. Hence, as a teacher, as a new teacher, when I entered the classroom, I thought, okay, I have so many ideas in my head. I'll try this, I'll try that. I have this idea about excellent education. I'll do this, that. Then the reality actually hits, and you understand the context of your classroom, and then you see that, oh no, this needs to be fixed before you think that X idea need to be implemented here. So yeah, never come with your assumptions and uh, judgments when you enter a particular classroom. First, try to see what is the current reality, and then try to build on your ideas from there. Not to say that don't come up with your ideas of innovations, creativity, this, that, but bring them up aligned with the current reality as well. Try to understand where your kids are coming from, and this need not be only with the context of my kids. It can be in an international school as well, applicable there as well. It can be applicable to a remote village school as well. It is applicable everywhere. So for all the teachers, I would definitely suggest, like, enter your classroom without any judgments, without any prejudices, and absorb as much as information as you can about your kids, and then leverage your support, um, and drive the learning outcome from there.
All right. Now, just moving away for a little bit um, from the context of a particular classroom and your experience, of course, as a teacher, and going into a bit more of a broader space. I just wanted to get your opinion on where you would like to see the education space going. Like, what should we move
Yeah.
towards in terms of our goals with learning, and where do you see us in, say, 10, 15 years? Ideally, in an ideal scenario.
All right. Yeah. Um, that's definitely a very visionary question. I might not have enough of experience and vision to take in that particular question, but I'll tell you what I think of. Um, so, from my past, my own education, my years of experience with education, um, I cannot see a lot of changes happening in the classroom, and that is something that disheartens me. There have been coming curriculum frameworks, policies around education, changes in the kind of books that comes, yet the pedagogy has not changed as much. Like, you may see your NCRT books changing a little bit, becoming more interactive, but still the teacher who's coming to your classroom might not be delivering in the same manner that the book is supposed to be. Um, and that is where I want the education system to be changing. Like, for example, in a classroom that Teach for India enters, it is not like we are not doing what conventional system want us to do. We are doing that, but at the same time, we're also making sure that we're bringing to the classroom what's worth learning. Um, we try to prioritize on things that is needed for the kids at that particular age. For example, my kids are in 5th grade and they're going to be moving to a 6th grade and they're turning into adolescents. What are the things that they need to learn before entering the age? Are my girl child girl children equipped enough to be learning about periods? Are they informed enough how they're going to handle that particular situation? Are my are my male children equipped enough to understand about what are the changes that are going to be happening in their body to be accepting it? So these are the things that the education system at times fails to deliver, and comes from the facilitator. Sometimes I feel like they need to identify the needs that are there in their classroom and need to deliver it at that point. um, Largely on a very education system perspective, I think this is very needed, and it's high time that we shift a lot towards building value based education system. When I say values, it is largely around having the right kind of mindsets, building people with high principles, um, discipline, and a lot on consciousness, because uh, because of the climate crisis that we are going through, because of different dynamic changes that are happening around the world. Are we creating individuals who are strong enough to be taking up uh, in the future this level of dynamism? Are we creating humans who are conscious enough, who will be able to address climate change and have lifestyle shift, right? uh, I'll tell you where I come from, because my particular generation faces the highest amount of mental health problems than any other generation. The reason, because our education system uh, took us through pressure, took us through a lot of high expectations without understanding where we come from. They took us through a lot of doing things what we are not supposed to. Like sometimes I feel like as a child I would wanted to do a lot of different things at the same time other than just academics, even though I'm good at it. So largely that is where our my particular education system failed to address my needs. So what I really want the education system to be addressing the needs of child, to be very flexible, at the same time disciplined enough to build principled, high valued, and conscious leaders.
It was a very, very comprehensive answer, and I think we touched on quite a few things. But I'm just going to focus on one thing that you said, which was about how you wanted to do a bunch of different things, but I don't think the education system always allowed for that. And maybe we should move towards changing that. So I'm sure that you're aware that there's a lot of like rote and sometimes irrelevant concepts that are there in the current education system, and you cannot completely disregard the system as it helps students with fewer opportunities and creates a sort of same level. Like, I think our education system is created more with the idea of getting everybody to at least a simple baseline level of education rather than working on uh, where the child can thrive, which
Yeah.
also has its pros because we're talking about students who come from a variety of different socioeconomic backgrounds and might not have the same opportunities. But are there any other more important, hard and soft skills that the students must learn to do well in life, regardless of where they come from? And how do you create a balance between teaching things that the system requires, but also teaching things that are really important in the long run in terms of, like, say, life skills?
Yeah. So I'll start with hard skills. All right. I can't list down the hard skills uh, because it differs from person to person what they want to pursue in their life. As an engineer, you might have different set of hard skills that you really require to have. As a business person, they are different. As a designer, there are different. But um, when I think about uh, soft skills are very large, spectrum. And among that, I just pick one thing, which is self-awareness. If you're high on self-awareness, uh, you can be a good employee, you can be a good manager, you can be a good leader, you can be a good human. It's just that high self-awareness is required. You need to know what are your values as a person. You need to know how do you operate in a certain difficult situation. You need to know how and what kind of a mindset you carry with yourself. uh, and that is all that is required uh, for one person to be built. Apart from that, there's a lot of like talking about communication skills and developing communication skills that goes around, and I believe it is super duper necessary. At the same time, we need to realize how to evolve that over a period of time. Back in my time, I was taught to write emails, but it was not really efficient, because until my college I didn't know how to write proper emails, because that was not the language that emails needed. um, there were still letters to the editor that I was writing in my 10th grade exams. There were still letters to a friend that I was writing in my 10th grade exam. um, However, I felt like those kind of writing skills shaped me a little bit, but it was not really needed because I couldn't get the context and understanding of it, because मुझे नहीं पता था that if I'm writing a letter to the editor, how does it even make a difference, because I don't know uh, where, when, and where I'm going to use this particular thing. So there's a lot of evolution that needs to happen when we are delivering a certain concept. Okay, you incorporated communication skills, you incorporated writing skills, but how about using it more in terms of what is needed right now? So and that is something that a teacher needs to take a call on, right? The teacher needs to be aware, well read, enough to understand what the world actually needs, and then provide it to the children. Because I can't expect the books to change every year, I can't expect the curriculum to change every year, but I can definitely expect a teacher to know things and deliver in that particular manner. So when you talk about certain concept being rote learning oriented and not very specific to what is needed when they actually grow up, uh, then the rights should be given to the teacher to understand. Okay, if this particular concept is a rote learning oriented and not needed for your kids, skip. Uh, it will create another problem, I understand. It will create a problem of a lot of differences in different classrooms. But then as an institution of learning, you can definitely any day come up with a certain ideas that is mandatory for you to teach. And apart from that, just bring whatever you want to bring to your class, and just bring the world to the classroom. So yeah.
Great. That's all the questions that I had, and I think we covered a lot of different facets of what it means to be a teacher and a educator's perspective on where she sees the education world going. So if you have any like closing thoughts, comments, anything before we end the podcast, now's your time.
So what I want to actually bring as my closing thoughts is, every teacher who's listening to this particular podcast, or every aspiring teacher or any educator looking and listening to this particular podcast, just one request there, that please try to focus on the student outcomes. Try to prioritize on your goals and bring the world to your children. You will see crazy things happening when they go out there, and it's definitely very rewarding.
Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. It was absolutely wonderful to have you here. And yeah, that's all we had. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.